Welcome to this special episode of Ask the Expert. I'm Suresh Venkat. My guest today is Rishi Das, co-founder and chairman of Indiqube. Now, Indiqube is positioned as India's leading workspace partner. They specialize in offering workspace solutions to enterprises, unicorn startups, offshore development centers, and even solopreneurs. Rishi himself is a serial entrepreneur. Actually, he's a self-professed entrepreneur, more about that later, who believes in the old school method of taking a long view of business building. Rishi Das, welcome to Ask the Expert. First question for you. Right? Did you come from a wealthy family, and where did you get the money to start your first business?
I do not come from a wealthy family. My father was an upright government servant in CSLC board in Lucknow. So that's where I come from. Yeah.
Okay. So no family wealth to start with. So how did you accumulate enough capital to start your first business?
So let me give a little background. I completed my engineering from IIT Roorkee in 1997 and joined a company called Tata Infotech at that point of time. And within 6 months, decided to leave the company because always wanted to be an entrepreneur. And few things were coming to our mind that any business that we start should require less capital because capital was scarce in our family. The second was that if we could leverage our little bit of core competency, which was around having brief stint in IT, coming from good academic backgrounds, and more importantly, look for an opportunity which is not very crowded. There is some gap in the market which we could address and grow and build it up. In between, my brother passed out from IIT Delhi, Anshuman. He joined Infosys in 98 June. So that is where we both left in 99 early and started CareerNet. And the thesis that I just shared with you, that all came true in that venture. Okay. The business did not require capital. As you can imagine, recruiting business doesn't require a lot of...
And this was a placement and staffing kind of
So CareerNet focuses on providing people for a variety of jobs, right from campus till senior level hires. A lot of focus on new economy, IT, technology kind of sectors.
And this was around about the time the Y2K phenomenon was
99 is the time when we did that, and Y2K was at its peak. So there was a lot of requirement for people to go out of India and work. And since we come from good academic backgrounds, we knew a lot of people because of our school and college both. And that was real networking, if you ask me, at that point of time. Unlike today, when you have social media, you have job boards and WhatsApp and all of that. There was nothing at that point of time.
Do it the old-fashioned
Absolutely. Method. So our networking used to happen at the dinner paratha points, typically the chai addas, or at homes of bachelors at that point of time. So that was real networking. And so basically, we started with a rented PC at that time, and there was no concept of venture capital or anything at that point.
And just a couple of numbers from your first venture. You managed a 100 crore bottom line, if I'm not mistaken, not a top line, 100 crore bottom line with 2,500 employees and with no debt or equity funding. So I can imagine a small startup, rented PC, doing a small scale business. But a 100 crore bottom line isn't a small scale business anymore. You're going to need systems and processes and all sorts of things. So the key question here is, how did you pull this off without debt or equity funding?
I will say the initial customers who actually funded our business. Okay. The customers liked us as individuals, as professionals. They believed in our story and our delivery of the services that we are doing to them. So they were our biggest bet. The first 5 years, since 99 we started, the first 5 years, most of the money that we made or we could generate cash came from our, I will say, 7-8 customers. So we owe a lot to them. And I strongly believe that that is a very good way to look at funding for a lot of younger startups, entrepreneurs, because initial customers, they believe in you a lot. They don't mind paying that slightly extra also. So far, they are satisfied with what you are offering. So in our case, I think that's what played a key role. And that's where we could live without raising any capital, either debt or equity.
Okay, so now I'm going to ask you a question about your self-professed word, entrepreneur, right? You see a lot of startups talking about venture capital. Now they talk about venture debt. Very few startups talk about customer funding. In your view, are they missing a big trick in the book by not focusing on customer funding?
Absolutely. I fully agree with you that they are missing a big trick because that's the best and the most sustainable way to fund a venture. That rely on your customers. You have no liability, so to say. On both sides, you don't have somebody sitting on your head who is giving you a mandate to grow too fast, too slow, change your product to a pivot or whatever. So I think from that perspective, if that can happen, I think that's the best thing to happen. And eventually, that is what will actually help also to scale up the business. If you have a happy, satisfied customer who is willing to pay, any investor eventually who looks at your business will also look at.
So Rishi, what you're saying sounds pretty much like common sense. So in your view, are many startups in India missing a trick in the book when they don't rely on customer funding, for instance?
Suresh, what I believe is that somewhere in the last decade or so, this narrative has got built that without funding you can't have a startup, and funding is an end in itself, which is not the case at all. If you look at Western Europe, especially if you look at Germany, there are so many family businesses which have never raised a single penny in venture capital or private equity, and they are extremely successful. They are multinational status businesses which are running there. So I think India is not going to be any different 15-20 years down the line if we look back. And I'm very happy that what is happening in the last 6-12 months is a correction. Somewhere that sanity is getting restored. You exist because your customer is there, and eventually it's a customer which is going to foot the bill for whatever he or she is buying and has to see value in that. So I think we are going in that direction. Hopefully with this corrective, we should be on the right path.
Or until the next boom in venture capital happen again, then we'll forget all the lessons of this and we'll go back into a venture funding bubble.
So I will say that look at how this whole thing started. If I go back to the say late 90s, right, the IT industry, and then if we look at the rise of companies like Biocon and all that, I think we were on the right path. If you ask me, till then, I think it's only in the last 7-8 years is where we got this concept that you can be brash, arrogant, and yet be successful, and you can be the last man standing, growth at any cost. Kind of a thing. I think that narrative somewhere got created, and the last boom that happened actually fueled that. So I think by and large, our Indian entrepreneur story has been on the right track. I think that blip was required, and hopefully it should put us back on good path.
Rishi, you have said in previous interviews that you want to build a company to stay, not build to sell, right? And you've talked about institution building and organization building. So what if somebody came suddenly today and made you an offer that you couldn't refuse? Would you say, no, I want to build to stay, I don't want to sell?
For any founder, any company that you create of any scale is like a kid. And whether you like it or not, it stays with you for life. Today, if most of the Infosys founders are out, right, what happens at Infosys still impacts them in a good or a bad way. First of all, my view will be that when you look at any such opportunity that comes your way, you have to look at certain parameters. Will this acquisition or will this buyout allow still the company to offer the core value that they have, the core value proposition, the core set of values that will stay? Will it be nice to the environment? Will it be high on governance? Will it be nice to the employees? And most importantly, that will it offer sustainable growth? I think if all these parameters have to be looked into, and if they look right, then there is nothing wrong in calling something as a good offer. Good offer cannot be just about money.
It's not.
Also, if you look at what we have seen now, a lot of companies getting listed and people are treating listing as an end in itself. I think it's a very reckless and irresponsible way of thinking that I am out of the business and let anything happen. I think for an average shareholder who is ignorant on the stock market, it's not a fair promise, and I think somewhere it will come and bite back or hound. So I think the responsibility of any founder does not end with that sellout. So these are the parameters which one has to look at, the way a parent will look at his child, even if the child moves on his own, or a daughter getting married in the Indian context and being on his or her own.
All right, Rishi, let's talk about your specific company, Indiqube. You work in the real estate sector in your current venture. Now, real estate businesses typically require connections because there is a high overlap with government agencies and politicians and bureaucrats. How did you pull this off, this whole venture in the real estate sector? I understand you're not from Bangalore and you're not a local. Even more difficult to pull it off?
I will say the place plays a very important role in any venture. And if I would not have decided, and that's destiny, if I would not have decided to come to Bangalore and do this career net business and eventually Indiqube in a different city, I'm quite sure the outcomes would have been different and may not have been as good as it is Bangalore. So first thing, I will give credit to the city which I made as my Karam Bhumi. This city is a great city, and in this city what differentiates is that what you know is more important than whom you know. And even though the city has grown multiple fold, I think the city still retains that character. So that is a very, very important fact to understand. And we now have centers across multiple cities, so I can see the difference in the governance levels and stuff like that. And irrespective of the governments which have been in power, I think the city has maintained that character. The second and more important point is that what is the choice we want to make and what is the desire we have. So me, my brother and my better half Meghna, who is a co-founder of Indiqube, we believe that we got in the business by choice. and we want to keep it that way. So we do get a lot of calls from people. There are pressures at times. There is a lot of, you can say, you can call it greed that comes in, but we clearly stay away from that. So I think it is a lot about the choices that we make and how we handle the pressure. But staying course is very important. It's very easy to get distracted and lose track. And if one does that, I think in the long run, that's the right way to go. And in our case, that has worked.
Okay, so I've been told by multiple entrepreneurs that what you say no to is as important as what you say
Absolutely.
yes to.
Fully agree
Right?
with you.
And you just said that. So do you and your co-founders have a framework for saying no to an opportunity or no to a particular vertical or anything?
Yeah, a lot of times. Actually, I can't name the company. There is a very now a listed startup. They came to us asking for a lot of space. And we refused that we will not give you the space. They felt very offended. I said that your values and our values don't coincide. So there are a lot of customers. We have certain set of landlords because we take a lot of buildings on rent from these landlords where we clearly stay away. So if we don't see a value system match, then we see that it's a long-term pain we are creating for either of us. And it's better to say no. And so it's very important to make those choices of the kind of people that we want to work with or we can work with.
You talk about values quite a lot. Do you list down these values and how do you keep these values alive in your organization on a day-to-day basis?
The best and the easiest way to keep these values alive is to practice them. Typically,
and not put them up as signboards in the office.
No, that doesn't work because employees, I will say, largely are like children.
They will see what you do.
They will see what you do, not what you say. Right. So if you talk about, say, humility, mutual respect, integrity, and all these, you have to practice all of that. And any company today is like swimming in an open fish bowl. So your moves are visible to everyone. You can't be say one thing and do another thing. Your alumni, which has moved on in other companies, know what you stand for. So I think just be true that whatever you say, you practice that. I think easiest and the best way to do that.
And one of the values you've articulated in previous interviews is that you're building an institution or a company that's here to stay, not something for a quick sale.
Yes.
So what does this mean? So if somebody came and made you an offer day after tomorrow, a really lucrative offer, you'd say no, come back in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, or let's talk. What would you say?
This is a conversation I had with one of our angel investors and Indiqube, Mr. Ashish Gupta, who was a managing partner at Helion. And 20 years back, our relationship goes 2 decades old. And he somehow remembered a good line which I told him 20 years back, that the best companies are bought, they are never sold. Somewhere I said that, and he only reminded me of that 4 or 5 years back. So I think that is the key thing which all founders have to understand, that you cannot create a company to sell. And you have to create an organization. Even if you decide to sell, whatever values and seeds that you have sown, even though your ownership changes hands, they don't go away. That character remains with that organization. So I think it is very important to seed the right set of values early on and do the right thing all the time.
Rishi, in your first venture, you said you didn't raise any money. You relied entirely on, I imagine, personal savings and customer funding. But for Indiqube, you have raised $45 million. So now this brings 2 questions to the fore. One, what are the obligations you feel towards the money that you've raised? And second, how are you going to deploy this money?
So out of this 45 million that we raised, 40% is the money that we brought in, because we were lucky. We had, this was a second venture, so we had money.
These are your reserves that accumulated over the years.
Yeah.
So skin in the game, critically important.
Very important. Very, very important, especially when you are doing a 2.0 venture. And as much you can conserve your cap table, it is better that if you put in your own money. And that also demonstrates the fact that we are serious, we are committed to the business, and we're willing to bet with our own money. So that's what we did. The other point I will say is that this money came from Westbridge Capital. They have been nice to take an early call on us. And Ashish Gupta, angel investor, the other 2 set of people who have put the balance of money into the venture, mostly coming from Westbridge Capital over there. And this money which we raised, so basically when we started in 2015, it was again a business which we funded. I will say 0 to 1, 1 to 10. Till the stage of 10, we funded the business. When the business reached 10 and we realized that we have to go to 100, we required capital.
You needed capital for that expansion.
That's where the need for the equity capital came in, because it was going beyond our means and it was not the right thing to do. Plus, it required taking a substantial amount of risk. And we needed the risk money into the venture beyond our own capital. And this money predominantly went into funding technology, the brand promotion, the geographical expansion, and trying out new verticals or business lines. So this is where the most of that money went. We also continued to take debt in that business, but where we had cash flow requirements, where we had predictable orders from our clients, and we just needed to fund the fit outs and all, that money was funded through debt. So my advice will be that one needs to look at a healthy combination of debt and equity in the venture. All risky aspects, newer aspects should be funded through equity. But wherever you have cash flow requirements or you need to fund your regular orders or customer deliveries and all, they should be funded through
Though
debt.
that's debt funding is
Debt
good
funding,
for those things. Okay, all right. So one of the questions we get from lots of our viewers is, for a startup founder, how much equity should they dilute at the first fundraise?
My experience has been that if it is an institutional investor, they typically try to take 25-26% of the company.
A significant
chunk where they want to have large minority shareholder rights. They are not comfortable going a number below that. But if it comes to angel investors and all, they are okay with numbers. But one thing I will say over here is that today, fortunately, funding has become very fashionable. Right, you go to any tier 2, you will find an informal network of so-called angel investors. We need to be very cognizant about that in India, the capitalist class, by and large, still is a rent and interest-seeking class. Right, which is a risk-averse class.
So that's not really risk capital then.
No, it is not risk capital. Yeah, because they're traditionally, if you look at any rich guy you talk, beyond their business, their maximum incomes come from rent or interest in a tier 2. Now, of late, stock market has started giving. So one thing has to be very, very clear, that what kind of investors you are bringing on board and what are their motivators. I know of enough businesses where they raised money from all kinds of angel investors and eventually destroyed the business.
So the word angel is misleading.
Angel is very, very angelic, or they are not at all angel. They are, I will call them amateurs. I will not in any negative way. So they are doing what has worked for their business, right? Which were predominantly cash generating, cash economy businesses. So they don't understand the concept of venture capital. So one has to be very careful with the kind of people that you are going to raise even your angel investing.
Now, with your current business, Indiqube, you obviously compete with giants like WeWork, and I imagine homegrown competitors like Office and the others. Now, these are pretty well-funded companies. Some come from large industrial houses as well. So, do you see yourself in a David versus Goliath kind of battle?
When we started and before the, I will say the COVID crisis hit, yes, definitely there was a David versus Goliath situation. More specifically in the case of our global competitor. That was the situation because they had raised lots of money and not only in our category, there were category after categories.
And they raised a lot of controversy as well, along with the money.
Yeah. And category after category, Suresh, if you see, was raising money and they were destroying categories. Where you needed $100 million, $1 billion was being given to people just to destroy the entire competition. So I think that narrative also set out in our industry at that point of time. Luckily for us, the COVID happened to that extent, and whole thing fizzled out. But I must say that when you have a David versus Goliath situation, which you have in a lot of categories, you need to be clear about few things. One, you are building for India, and India is a large, complex market. Companies which raise a lot of money, mostly these companies pick up a Western model and they try to tweak that model and bring to India. Look at our case, for example. If one tries to only set up managed office spaces in tech parks or the UB City kind of buildings, how many UB cities or India Bull Center kind of buildings are going to come?
Those are anyway intimidating for many people to enter.
Yes, so they are not affordable for most of them. So one has to look at creating real estate beyond such 5-star buildings. And that means working with a lot of grade B buildings, so to say. Can you take up a grade B building, renovate, upgrade, and create a grade A experience? I think we very successfully did that. The second is, you cannot start in a small town in India and say, I will offer a $4.99 pizza. You have to start with a $1.99 pizza and offer toppings and then launch a $2.49, $2.99 kind of a thing. 5-star buffet doesn't work all the time in this country. So pay as you use is a very, very important aspect which we believe was, which was very specific and indigenous to our kind of requirement. Then one size fits all. We have to understand that in our space, when you look at a US or a Europe kind of a location, people mostly managed office co-working is a downtown business where you essentially take few seats. But in India, it is IT led. And any company which has 300, 400 employees will like to have their own office. They don't want to sit in somebody else's office. They want their chai of their type. They may be happy to spend 20 rupees on a high-end coffee, or they may say, okay, I will spend 5 rupees on the coffee and I may give samosa in the office. So the whole benefits have to be personalized for them. So I think these are the nuances that are there. And I also say that look at our country, right? We require affordable food and affordable transport before we can offer free beer in the office.
Correct.
I don't think how many employers in this country will be excited about offering free beer in the office. So I think we have cultural sensitivities and all, and any David in that business, if they play on these strengths, these nuances, these gaps, which they understand better than the Goliath, in this case, the large well-funded MNC giant, I think they have a huge unfair advantage which they can leverage.
So Davids can exploit the nuances in the business.
Absolutely.
With Goliaths may not be able to see, or may not be able to do something about, even if they do see.
Even if they do.
Rishi, a little while ago, you spoke about the hundreds, maybe thousands of businesses across India and the world that are hugely funded. These start from food to clothing retail to footwear makers. Bangalore has its share of very own company. Rameshwaram Cafe has been in the news a lot. And you go outside Rameshwaram, there's a line day, morning, noon and night. They have no seating. They barely have any standing. People are willing to pay, stand in line, pay them money, often in cash, and eat food on the road. And its popularity is unending. So my question is this. If you are a young startup founder, let's say you're in your 20s and you're a startup founder, and what can you learn from successes of businesses like this?
The key thing to learn from these kind of businesses is that you stay focused on your core promise and be true to your core customer. Like look at our case, for example, people may say that who is your customer? My customer is not the tenant or a company whom I am giving office space. My customer is an employee of that customer. So for me,
so that's an important nuance.
That's an important nuance.
It's not just the person who rents it. The person who works there, who may have no control over the office rental, is actually your end user.
Your end customer. So I think you need to be very clear that who is your end customer. Then what is important for that end customer? If you are an employee working in a company in a country like India, for you need a full meal at say less than $100. Right? You need affordable transport to come to your office. You need basic recreation in your office. You can't say that, okay, you take chips and banana in the office like a tuck shop in a developed country. That doesn't work in our place. So I think if you remain true to your core promise, do less with more. That is very important. Be focused on unit economics. Typically, if the business fundamentally is not generating profit or money, then it is not sustainable.
Scale is an irrelevant question for you, I imagine.
Is irrelevant because more scale means more trouble.
More trouble, yeah.
And unfortunately, if you have not fixed your unit economics, how can you scale it 100 or 1000x? That is very, very dangerous. And doing less with more. Somehow, somewhere the narrative got built that startups are no longer about frugality.
It's about flamboyance.
It is about flamboyance, right? You see the rentals they pay, the offices they pick up. It's not the way startup should be ideally built. Startup is all about frugality. Doing less with more is a key thing. And I think that should not be lost. And these businesses that you are talking about, I think most have them have stuck to the first principles. And that is where they have been able to scale up without destroying their cap tables and destroying a lot of relationships, value.
Many of them may not even have a cap table. It might be just a single founder or a family owns it.
You are so right.
It's an informal verbal
cap table for them.
Okay. Now let me ask you a personal question. Now you're from IIT Roorkee, your brother you said from IIT Delhi. In your view, has the IIT phenomenon captured too much of the startup imagination, the funders' imagination, the venture capital's imagination?
I fully agree with you, Suresh. It is very unfortunate that large part of media, the Western money and this so-called IIT phenomena,
IIT-IIM combination,
IIT-IIM phenomena has hijacked the entrepreneurship story in this country. There are so many successful, beautiful businesses this country has. Some of them you named. You look at Suguna Chicken kind of businesses. I think who have created thousands of crores of turnover, value, employment, everything. I think somewhere that narrative is getting corrected with this current thing happening, which is very, very much required. And it is not very different from way I will say that average guy who doesn't speak good English 10 years back, right, is much more respected and taken seriously in India today than it was 10 years back, right? So I think that correction is happening as we talk.
There's a popular cliche, Rishi, that every business is a tech business. And one of the reasons we see the dominance of the IIs or the IIMs, or in fact, the whole funding game that we need to invest in our tech. Do you agree with this cliche that every business is a tech business? Because I've been to Rameshwaram Cafe many times and I don't think it's a tech business.
So true.
It's a really tasty food business.
Yes.
Tech may play a small role,
exactly,
but it's not a tech business. And we are kidding ourselves if we call it that.
So I completely concur, Suresh, with your views that technology has been taken little too far.
Too far.
You look at a good apparel business, for example, or you look at a food
That's about
business.
clothing and fit and color and style.
You look at all these products, you may require some amount of, and we need to differentiate when we talk about technology into what is consumer tech and what is core tech. I am all for core tech. If anything at the back end which allows you to make your food tastier or your food to last longer, typically all that is core tech. That is nothing to do with the so-called tech that we talk about.
That could be a better batter grinder.
Yes,
it doesn't have to be
yes,
software.
Exactly, yeah. Unfortunately, we have started confusing consumer tech as tech. The core tech or the domain tech, I think, is very, very relevant. We have overplayed the consumer tech part to a good extent. Second thing is that when we look at anything, we first of all worry about the customer outcomes and the customer experience. Anything that can help me enhance that, I should be looking at doing that. And adoption is a key parameter. When you build any technology, you should always worry that is it being adopted? Are people using it? You cannot, as a startup, get into a feature war that my app has all these features which a bigger company app also has. Just see the adoption numbers, and that should be your litmus test to decide what tech you need to build. Third thing, and very important, technology today is luxury. A lot of technology professionals, unfortunately, today think that they are God's gift to mankind.
Especially the ones in AI.
Yes,
I imagine they're the ones who are the
right?
cream of
So
the crop.
technology is very expensive. You have to consume very responsibly. So I think these are the important things which people should look at. But as you rightly said, you get the right example that young entrepreneurs or would-be entrepreneurs should not worry too much about tech. If they don't know tech, that doesn't mean that there is an opportunity. There is enough and more opportunity where technology is just an enabler.
The other thing that we see in the popular narrative is that entrepreneurship is seen as this combination of glamorous and struggle business, that we are entrepreneurs, we don't sleep, we stay up all night, we work really hard and whatever, and it's very glamorized because this is the most noble thing we're doing. At the end of the day, it's a business, they're making goods or services, selling it, somebody's buying it, not very different from a car maker or any other manufacturer.
Absolutely.
Do you think it needs to be deglamorized a bit, this whole entrepreneurship game?
Absolutely. If you look at, entrepreneurship or businesses exists for thousands of years. I don't think anything new is happening in businesses. When I started in 99 along with my brother, entrepreneurship, even people did not know the word. If you don't get a job, you start a business, right? Self-employment was called a business. We have come to the other extreme where you have nothing and you are called an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurship has become too fashionable. Too much of limelight is there. And I always use a good Sanskrit phrase that I learned in grade 6th or 7th. I had Hindi as a subject and that Sanskrit was there. I will just read out that shloka and then explain it. Kaka chesta bako dhyanam shwana nidra tathaivacha alpahari grahatyagi iyam vidyarthi panchalakshanam. So what it means that 5 attributes of a good student are, they should have the persuasiveness like a crow, kaka chesta, bako dhyanam, the focus like a crane, shwan nidra, sleep less, be alert, alpahari, basically consume less, and grahatyagi, penance. I think these are the attributes of a good student.
And they could be the attributes of a good entrepreneur as well.
I think nothing changes. If you just remove the word vidyarthi and replace it with entrepreneur, I think all these attributes are absolutely relevant. And a good entrepreneur has to take a long-term view, put his or her heads down and just keep doing the right thing. And it takes a good 15, 20 years, 25 years to build a good business. It's not a 100-meter sprint.
Some of the people who joined your venture in 1999, from your website, I see employee 1, 2 and 3 are still with you.
Yeah.
Now, there's a common narrative that says people join companies but leave people, right? So, you held on to people for a long time. Is there a secret to holding on to high-performing talent?
So, the key thing in our case that has worked is that, again, I will go back to the values part of it, that employees are like family, they are like children. You have to do the right thing. Whenever you believe that if something is not right or something you can't do after 10 years, don't do it in the first case. For example, if you look at our company, even today, we don't offer booze on the house in any of our get-togethers. Booze is always paid for. Right, so that's something. The second thing is, when in 10 years back we were looking at an office space, we had an option to go to a tech park, or we had an option to basically go to a next tier building but offer the same money on say food and transport for my employees. We opted for the later. So because we believe that is more important for my employees
than a fancy,
office. And if an employee is working for you, you should always be clear that if he or she has a need for money, they will only come to you. So we are very liberal with advances. All my first employees build their houses much earlier than me and Anshuman making our houses over there. So then focus, and the employee should always feel that there is an elder brother there, right? That insurance has to be always there. If something goes wrong in my personal life, there is somebody who will come to my rescue and help me out. I think if you focus on that and then be true to your ethics, because these people, some of them may leave, they have all the information about you. If you stay that course, I think you can create a great organization. And people today don't work just for money. They work for a lot of respect, acknowledgement. And I think if you provide all of that, there's no reason why people will leave so easily any organization.
Okay, Rishi, final question. Your co-founders are a brother and a spouse. Now, you have family in the mix as well, right?
Yes.
So, decision making is all the more complicated because there's a personal angle to it. What's next for all three of you at founders of Indiqube?
This is a bit philosophical for me. I lost my father a couple of years back, and my father comes from a place called Azamgarh, which is in eastern UP, and he was born in a Zamindar family. And he had seen the high and the low in his life. When he passed away, it made me think. So first, I believe that my spiritual journey somewhere started with that, his passing away. The second is, I see that there is a continuum. My father was born in British India in 1946. His first 25 years were his own struggle. The next 25 he spent building us up. And the next 25, he was there to help us after his retirement with setting up the business and all. So I see business as a continuum for the family.
Okay.
Right? And the India 75 years almost coincides with my family's 75 years.
Yeah.
So I think for me, the next 25 is a lot about providing that continuum to the family, ensure that we pass it on, and it's a responsibility. Amanat and Jagir, right, as Manish Sabharwal says.
Correct.
So it's not a Jagir, it's an Amanat. For me, that is very important, that I responsibly pass it on to the next generation, not only to my family, but to the largest stakeholders, my set of employees who have put their entire careers with us.
Mm-hmm.
And more also, I will say that the rise of India in next 25 years, I think I would really like, and I hope I will be tried, that our grandchildren will be born or will be in a developed India. Not a developing India.
So that's your vision for the country.
That's the vision, and I strongly believe in the power of compounding. And I think what my father started in the 75, if we do it right, me, my family, next 25.
You are reaping the benefits of
absolutely.
that compounding.
Completely, we are reaping the benefits. And I always say there are shareholders beyond the cap table. We don't recognize our families as the largest shareholders.
Because they sacrifice a lot for your success,
They sacrifice a lot of success. So that's my bit on that, Suresh.
All right. Rishi Das, thank you for joining us on this episode of Ask the Expert. And viewers, thank you for watching.
Yeah, thank you, Suresh. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, thanks.